The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today.
Well, welcome to The Journey. My name is Kevin Polky, and I am the host of The Journey. And today we have a special guest with us, Matt Weldon. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Well, Matt, as I have new guests on the journey, one of the questions I usually start off with is, when you have an opportunity to have fun, what does Matt do for fun today?
Well, it depends on the season, I guess. I'm a big golfer. I try to get out as much as I can, when it's seasonal, if you will. And there's I say I'm a golfer. I play golf. I'm not that good, but good enough to hit a few decent shots during the round that makes me keep coming back. So, um, but yeah, when it's not time to golf, I try to travel with my kids as much as possible. I'm a big proponent of traveling versus giving gifts, like materialistic gifts. So I'd rather make memories than give them something that they're going to forget about in a week or a month or whatever, like a new pair of shoes, or something that they'll play with, or depending on how old, because I've got four kids all the way from 24 to 8. So there's a wide range there. So
Well, it's funny that you say that. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law, or my sister-in-law and her husband, my brother-in-law, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, maybe when their kids were in high school, so it was maybe even 15 years ago, they started doing something similar for Christmas. They would call them experiences. So they would,
right,
it was about, and it worked out that, when they went away to college and they're both in college at the same time, that window of time before they went back for spring semester, they would then travel different places. And to your point, then it was more about the experience than it was about something that either could get broken or set aside over time. So, and when you think of those places, especially, that's a pretty wide range of 8 to 24.
right.
But what is one of those experiences that stand out to you when you think about some of those?
Well, last summer I took two of my girls to New York, and we stayed right in Times Square. The
Okay.
first time they've been there, and we walked around, did the touristy stuff, went to the World Trade Center, which I think is important for them to see and experience, and the Central Park, and some nice dinners out, and of course there was some shopping involved, but yeah, it was good for them to see. I mean, we've been to Chicago a million times, but New York just has a different vibe to it, and especially Times Square, where there's a ton going on, and a lot of different, for lack of a better word, personalities walking around. So I think it's good for them to be exposed to that rather than the same old stuff that they see every day. And I think traveling provides the best education in my limited view. But and then my son and I went out to Arizona for a concert last summer. It was only about 115 degrees out there in the summer, but it was somebody that he wanted to see, and him and I got to have a dude's weekend, as we call it. And we've been to a lot of different places, as far as the the family vacations, and sometimes we all go together, and sometimes we go in groups, so to speak. Like I said, took my girls, took my son. So we try to do some different things, and this year we're gonna get down to Orlando, and just kind of hang out there for a while.
Yeah, I just got back from a 10-day vacation with my daughter, my wife, and my daughter and her husband, and that was our Christmas gift to them, or back and forth for us. And we went, we were down in the Panama City Beach last weekend. So that was I mean, even though it was in the midst of other people's spring break, we were able to find some kind of unique places to be. And we checked out a couple places, and one place we ended up going to, uh, it was just way out of the way. And when we pulled in the parking lot, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what did we stumble upon? Restaurant ended up being beautiful. It was a great food, very engaging staff. And then they asked us, because it was in the middle of the afternoon, they asked us to be in one of their reels for like a commercial. And
Oh, cool.
which probably the coolest part of that whole thing was that we got to meet the executive chef, and he was telling us the story about this new dish that he was promoting. And so it was kind of those unique little things that we ended up going on that little adventure, because it was one of those rain days that you couldn't be at the beach or the pool. And it ended up being one of those special highlights of the trip.
Yeah, and those small things are what we hope to remember, right? I mean, i- the trips are great, but just those small segments of the trips that you remember just out of the blue when you're driving, you're like, oh man, that was cool. Or oh, I remember, when we went here and we saw this or we saw that and we did that. I mean, I think that to me is the most beneficial thing, is just those small moments where you remember. And it's even cooler when the kids bring it up out of the blue. Hey, remember when we did this, that, and that at, in New York City? And then I'll think back, I'm like, yeah, I think I do. I mean, they remember. I mean, whether they're 30, 24, 8, I mean, those are memories that they're gonna have, and that's important. And as you get older, I think we realize that making those memories is more important than the materialistic things that we used to buy them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Um, so speaking of that, I know we had talked before, and how we originally met was that you had went to local high school here outside of Rockford, and Hononegah High School. And when you were in high school, and then before you went off to college, what were you involved with? Any activities, extracurricular activities? What was your as a high school student, college student? What was your kind of thing that you were involved with?
So in high school, I played baseball for a couple of years, and then I think I realized that I wasn't going to play in the majors, so I did not play my junior and senior year. My high school time was really centered around socializing, for a lack of a better phrase, and we had a lot of good times with a lot of good people that I still talk to and hang out with it to this very day. And Rockton, where I grew up, was one of those communities where you would literally walk out the door at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you would come home at dark. And you'd maybe pop in for lunch or a quick bite at dinner or whatnot, but you'd get on your bike and you'd go, and you'd come back occasionally, like I said, to grab something to eat or whatever. Then we'd go to the Rockton pool, and we do that in the afternoon, and then we do that at night, depending on the day, or we'd be out, playing baseball or basketball, or just riding our bikes to do some new adventures and whatnot. And like you said, high school is more of a social thing for me. And then I decided to, go to college. Went to Rock Valley for a couple of years, trying to get things figured out, and then I ended up going to Eastern Illinois. Some people call it the Harvard of the Midwest. I don't claim to have made that up, but again, Eastern was a great time, and graduated from there, and then moved to downtown Chicago with I think about 4 or 5 of us that went to Eastern. So it was a good run for a while. It was a good run.
Sure. And then what led you to come back to the Roscoe Rockton area?
So I was back in the Rockton Roscoe area one night, visiting some friends, hanging out, and I saw this girl, and I'm like, "Is that so and so from high school?" And um, about, I don't know, 6 8 months later, I came back. I I came back and moved out of Chicago, and yeah, that was it. There's no, changing job story or whatever else. That I met a girl as, who was it? Robin Williams? Did he say that in that movie?
Yeah, Good Will
And
Hunting. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and
yeah, it was
I
about a girl.
yeah, have to see about this girl. So
Yes, that's what it, yeah, yeah,
yeah, nice.
yeah.
And so then when you, well, maybe going back to your with Eastern, what did you major in at Eastern?
It's actually a social science major, secondary ed. So I got my teaching degree and I did that for 1 year. And I said to myself, there is no way I can do this. And I was teaching in Prospect Heights, which is right next to Arlington Heights suburb. And every day I would like go home and my head would just hurt from the I mean, these were eighth graders and they think they know everything and they've got everything figured out and testosterone and what it was not a good experience. And then I believe at the end of the year, my uh, principal said, "Hey, we might have an open position for next year." Because it was a 1 year like fill in for maternity, if I remember right. And I said, "You know what? I'm good." And then that's when moved downtown Chicago after that,
Okay.
and started a different chapter.
Okay, okay. And then what, and that obviously, going through that, right? We had these ideas when we were in college or high school that this is what I think I want to major, this is what I think I want to do. And either sometimes it's because it's not a good experience, or we actually get to experience it without the training wheels on. And we're like, this is not a fit for me at all. And it sounds like that's
Right.
kind of what happened in your case.
Yeah, 100%. And as far as you get into teaching, you want to help kids and do things for them and make sure that they're on the right track or whatever. And then the other part of it, and I remember this, that I'm like, hey, cool, I'm gonna give my summers off. I'm gonna have 2 weeks, and it was not for me. And I always say that teachers are the most underpaid people in the country. I mean, the stuff that they have to put up with, and it's not like you're there from 8 to 3 and your day's over. You have planning and you have after school activities and whatever else. So I always say that teachers are greatly underpaid just because of that experience and how I lived it, and I understand that there's a lot more to it than just getting to class and handing out worksheets and tests and whatever else. So
Well, and I 100% agree with you because when I had the opportunity to do a seminar or a workshop for educators, you almost always end with thanking them for what they do because I believe that they have one of the most important jobs around because they are literally impacting our future. And it may be what they're teaching someone to do academically, but it also can be those connections or those things that they do on the side that may make a huge difference in somebody's life. So
right. And you can ask anybody really, hey, who was that one teacher? And you'll remember. I mean, I remember my first grade teacher. I mean, all of my teachers, they had some type of impact on me, whether it was positive or negative, but you always remember that. And coaches as well. I mean, coaching is is a huge way to shape young people's lives because you're spending time with them after school and you're trying to teach them how to play basketball or baseball or football or whatever else, but you're also trying to teach them responsibility and respect and doing things for others, your teammates and whatever else. So I mean, they have, I think, the most important job in society because your kids are spending a lot of time with these certain people every day. It's not like it's a once a week thing. It is every day, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. And it's important that those people realize how important that their job is.
well, and it's an interesting thing here in Illinois. In the last 5 years, specifically since the pandemic, the big thing for educators is social emotional learning, right? And even though, interestingly enough, it's been on the state expectations of state requirements, it's been on the books for over 20 years. But the last 5 years has really been seeing the big push for it. And there is this tendency to for educators to resist or struggle with how are we going to do this social emotional learning on top of all the other things we had to do. But to your point, teachers that are connected and engaged with their students are already doing those social emotional things anyways.
Right.
They're already connecting. They're already it's those little things that a coach will do. Yes, it is about, learning how to do the specific skill, but it's also about learning how to discipline yourself, how to push through a perceived struggle or pain barrier. And really is, I remember one of my coaches saying, are you hurt or you're injured? And,
Right.
and
Yeah.
learning how to differentiate between hurting and injured. And that's an inside job that someone outside invites you into learning for your own self, so
Right.
but I couldn't agree more with that. So moving from education to the next chapter, what was the next chapter?
So after that, I started working at the Chicago Board of Trade. That was back in the day where the traders were actually in the trading pits. So, if you've seen movies and whatever else, people standing in these pits and they're doing the hand signals and they're buying and selling, futures and whatever else. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then a buddy of mine was doing financial planning for a company out in the suburbs. And he's like, "Hey, man, I think you'd be a good fit. Why don't you come out and talk to my boss?" And so the next thing you know, I was doing financial planning, wealth management, whatever you want to call it. And so I did that for 20, 25, almost 25 years. And I sold my practice last August. Was it August? Yeah, last August. And I got out of that, and I always said if I couldn't give my clients 100%, that I wasn't going to continue doing it. And I think I hit a wall, or I was burned out, or whatever else. And there's some other underlying things going on that I wanted to pay more attention to. So I sold my practice, and I'm concentrating on other things and other ventures right now.
Sure. Well, kind of going back to when you originally were thinking about the idea of being an educator was to help students. And I would think of the individuals, my nephew to my own personal financial advisor, is there's a level of counsel and coaching that they do. It just happens to be regarding managing finances. And
Right.
kind of like it's very similar to coaching. It's okay, what's your goal, and then what are you going to do? Is it an attainable goal based upon what you're doing currently, and then you're coaching them and teaching them how to attain that goal. And so you're still helping people, just happen to not be in a classroom, right?
Right, right. And I used to joke that being a financial planner was like being an adult babysitter, because you literally have to hold people's hands because they are emotionally attached to their money, and which they should be, because they've worked very hard for it and they want to make sure that they're making the right decisions. But there is a coaching slash therapy, attachment that you have to your clients, because they're calling you for advice. They're calling you to walk them off the ledge, so to speak, because they're worried. They watch what's going on with the market or their accounts, and they want reassurance. So it is a different type of teaching and coaching and whatnot. And at the end of the day, it's a lot of responsibility, because when you have millions of dollars of other people's money, you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing and making sure that they're not hitting the panic button, or they're in a good spot. So that itself was a lot of stress for 25 years or so.
Sure, yeah. And I think, as I've just had a conversation just recently with the gentleman that I work with, and we were talking about where he was talking about how my accounts had been doing over the last, specifically the last 3 months, but then on average of how that's been over the last 15 years. And it was interesting about, like, kind of to your point of how to resist, the fear mongering, the fear that's going on, or the get rich quick, things. And
Right.
so, and we had the conversation of that. I don't do well in either one of those. I just do, okay, what's the long-term strategic plan? And he goes, have you looked at your accounts lately? I'm like, nope, because I want to look at it quarterly, or I want to look at it, semi-annually, because if I'm playing the long game here, I don't want to look at it on a day by day basis, because it's just going to either falsely get me too excited or falsely get me down in the valley. So I
Right.
just, and that was something that he taught me, as well as my brother-in-law and my nephew taught me as well.
And that's important, because if you look at any long-term financial chart about in the markets, it's this: up, 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 up. There's gonna be a lot of blips, but overall, you're on an upward trajectory. And if you hit the panic button and some of those blips, then you've really done yourself a disservice. So if you're in it for the long term, which most people are, then you've kind of got to hold on. And I get that it's easier said than done when they see their account value goes down. But at the same time, if your long term goal is to make money, then usually you're going to, if ride the storm out, so to speak. So
Sure. So two things I wanted to touch on. One, obviously, your next chapter that you're in now, that after you sold the practice. But I think how we originally met was a couple years ago, because a group of you and a group of your friends got involved with starting your own organization, of
we did.
Don't Be Next. So maybe tell our listeners a little bit about what is Don't Be Next, and what was the reason that was founded, and what do you guys do?
So the Don't Be Next Foundation is a charitable foundation that a few of us started. It probably goes back probably 7, 8 years ago, and we were on the golf course, just having a good afternoon and whatnot. And I forget who said, "Hey, we should start a foundation in honor of Craig and Patrick, two of our great friends that we grew up in Rockton from, basically kindergarten all the way until they passed away too soon." So then, we talked about it, and finally we actually took some action 5 years ago and started the Don't Be Next Foundation. And that we started that to honor Craig and Patrick, because they left us way too early, and we wanted to be able to create a legacy for them. And we've done a pretty good job on doing that so far. We have a golf outing every summer. We give out the largest scholarships in Hononiga's 100+ year history, which we're very proud of. We give to a lot of different organizations, as you know, as being a benefactor from us. And what we try to do is, raise awareness on mental health issues, and really try to give to organizations that are trying to do some good for the community and the kids. Not all kid based, but a lot of youth based groups we try to give to.
And I know, yeah, and I have so appreciated that, as far as, not only was that first, the first donation that you guys gave to Shatter Our Silence, but then last year having, you guys had a table, and being
Yep.
able to have some individuals at our annual banquet, and that was great. And then finding out that we had some other connections, because my son-in-law plays for the Rockford Ravens, and I know one of the guys,
Right.
Paul, I believe, is part of that.
Paul. Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's so it was great to have him at the event, as well as some of the other members of Don't Be Next. So
Yeah. If I remember right, I think I well, I know I did well at the silent auction. I think it was my mission to win as many of the prizes out there. I yeah, the people at my table are like, geez, because I came back and I had all this stuff, and I'm like, it's for a good cause and whatever else. And but yeah, that was a good night, and we were happy to be there and happy to have a table, and we're looking forward to doing that again.
Yeah, it was one of those things that we took a leap, right, to going from the Lombardi Club to Prairie Street, which was, just it was a huge risk and huge leap, and we didn't know. And then what we decided to do that time was a little bit different. And afterwards, we all agreed on the board that it was probably, every one of those events are, we have memories of every one of them, but last year's we were real happy with. So we're September 18th, we're going to be doing a similar type of thing back at Prairie Street, and so we're looking forward to that as well. Now,
Cool. Yeah, we'll be there.
awesome, thanks, Matt. I know that, as you said, a couple things that led up to this new chapter, kind of a new focus that you wanted to go into. A couple of years ago, you started your own podcast, and that was a Single Dad, Sober Dad. So maybe tell us a little bit about that, and then tell us about what you're doing with the next chapter now that you sold your financial business.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, I started the podcast, like we just said, Single Dad, Sober Dad. I'm coming up on 8 years of sobriety in June. So I kind of wanted to share my experience, strength, and hope, which is one of the guidelines of AA and whatnot, and do it in a way where it wasn't all doom and gloom. I try to have fun with the podcast, even though addiction obviously is a serious topic. But at the same time, you want to be able to relate to people, because people, they don't want to hear all the bad things, right? I mean, they want to be inspired, and they want to be like, oh man, maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was to try to get sober, or maybe I should reach out to get help, because it sounds like Matt's life is pretty good in sobriety versus what it was before. And I think we just did our 10th episode 2 weeks ago. So it's a startup podcast, but I think at the end of the day, if it reaches just one person and helps them, then that's the important part. And what's crazy is that I posted on social media and whatever else, and I've heard from more people from college that I haven't heard from in 25, 30 years, reaching out to me directly and saying, hey, that's a great story. I appreciate the podcast. I think I might need some help. And to me, that was the most beneficial part of doing the podcast so far, is just hearing from those people that I ran around with in college, finally coming out and saying, hey, you know what, if Matt Weldon realized that he has a problem and addressed it, then maybe I can too. And so it's very rewarding to hear that type of feedback about the podcast. And like I said, we try to keep it fun when I have guests on and whatnot. But at the end of the day, the message is that I like to joke, if a total dipshit like me can do it, anybody can do it. And it's true. It is 100% true, because I had no intentions of anybody telling me that I needed to go to rehab. And I actually ended up going, and that was the best decision that I ever made.
And speaking of that, and I think that message, Matt, I mean, I've been an addiction counselor since 1992, and one thing is for people to get sober because of the pain that their addiction has caused. The other thing is to go into recovery and live a lifestyle of recovery. That's a completely different thing, and that's a much harder aspect than just getting sober, because any good alcoholic can get sober. It's the staying in recovery and staying sober is usually the struggle that most alcoholics or addicts that I've come across struggle with, because it's
Right.
a thinking problem, not a drinking problem.
Right. And that's the thing that we say, oh, he's white knuckling it in recovery or sobriety. I mean, he or she isn't living a life of recovery. There's a difference. Like you said, people can get sober. That's not the problem. but how long are they going to maintain the sobriety living a miserable life, right? I mean, and that's the one thing that I never wanted to do. And I told myself when I was in rehab, I dove into rehab. And, some of the people in rehab, they're just kind of going through the motions because their husband or wife wanted them there or their court ordered or whatever else. But I told myself, I will never come back here as a patient. There were, 3 or 4 people that were in there, 4 or 5 different times at the same facility. And I'm like, hey, God bless you for keep on trying, but I'm not coming back. And so I kind of dove into the recovery, and it's worked so far. Again, addiction is a day-to-day process, and I always like to say, sobriety didn't make my life easier; it just made it better. I mean, life is not easy. I don't care if you're sober or if you're in addiction. There's still going to be bills. The kids are going to get sick. You're going to have to deal with this, that, and the other thing. It doesn't stop because you're sober. I mean, so you have to realize that. And I just think that's if it's a motto I can stick to, life isn't easier. It's just better, than I'm doing all right for myself.
Well, I think that aspect of it, and I think of, probably myself early on as a counselor, as well as other counselors that I've heard and listened to, that it's usually almost always talking about this idea of, you need to stop doing whatever because of the damage you're doing or the wreckage that you're causing or whatever it is. And most people that I know that are, in their addiction, they know what they're doing. There's no surprise. It's,
Right.
and so that fear aspect of it isn't, it's almost, well, that person may drink or do drugs to stay away from the fear. It's the invitation that life can be better even when it's hard.
Absolutely. And that's a great way of putting it. Life can be better when it's even when it's hard. And the beauty about a recovery that you're fully invested in is that, um, when I have a bad day, I don't like to say I have a bad day. Maybe I have a bad moment in the day, because if you're having a bad day, then that's really, I mean, 20 hours of a bad day is not realistic to me. I just like to say I have bad moments throughout the day and then I move on. But if I can live like that, then like I said, I'm doing all right for myself, realizing that the answer isn't going to, get a case of beer and sitting around and dwelling in my misery. That's not the answer for me anymore. And that's what happened a lot. And when you're angry and depressed and whatever else, the old adage, hurt people hurt people. I mean, it's true. I mean, I was not in a good place, and I was not a good husband. I was not a good friend. I was not a good brother or son. I was not a good human being because of where I was at. And I am grateful that I had the opportunity to go to rehab and get the tools to come out of there a better person, knowing that the work wasn't over. It just kind of started.
And with that, when you had the opportunity, well, I mean, it's a couple of things probably, right? You sounded like you had a stirring and was recognizing, probably a year ago, maybe even longer, that you needed to do something different than the financial planning and the wealth management. And then the opportunity came up for you to sell the practice, or sell your portion of the practice. What was yeah, maybe tell us a little bit about that calling or nudging or prompting for this next chapter. Well, yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if we're being honest here, which I think we are, there was a day that I was in my car and I looked down at my phone and it was ringing, and I looked, and it was a client that I really didn't want to talk to that day. And that had never really happened before. I didn't answer the call, and usually I was very, very good about picking up and answering the call and making sure that my clients got their questions answered and whatever else. But I remember it was like yesterday, I looked down and I'm like, No, I'm not answering that today. And I knew at that moment that if I wasn't engaged in helping my clients achieve their goals, then it was time for me to move on. And I think within the next hour, I called my business partner. I said, "Hey, I'm out." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Do you want to buy me out?" And he was like, "Yeah, we should talk." And that was it. So it was, I like to say, when you know, and I knew it was time to kind of disengage, and I had some, like I said, some other things going on that I wanted to pay attention to and give my time to, and but primarily, I just wasn't focused on what I should be doing, and to me, that was like red flag number one. Time to move on, because you don't want to half-ass anything, especially when it comes to your clients. And and that's the conversation that I had with a lot of people. And like I said, there's a few other things going on that I wanted to devote my time to, but primarily I wanted to, make sure that my clients were taken care of in the most positive way. And I didn't think I was going to be able to do that going forward.
And so, okay, I think those, call them red flags, call them, different indicators that it's like, okay, it's time for me to go, because staying staying too long almost always is going to not make it better. It's just going to be the next red flag, the next thing that's going to hit you in the head. It's going to be a little bit harder. And so I think that was really wise on your part to be able to listen to that. So did you know what the next stage or the next chapter was going to be?
I kind of did, but that was the scary part, where I've been doing the same thing for 25 years. I've built up a pretty successful practice, and a very, very good income and whatever else. So I kind of took a leap of faith and bet on myself and said, you know what? Whatever you do next, you're gonna be all right. And that's where I said to myself, I find joy in doing public speaking, um, and the podcast. I always love going to the podcast studio, and if I can help people have a better life, then that's what I want to do. And obviously, there's got to be some type of income or revenue coming in at some point, and that's gonna come. I'm not too worried about that, but what I want to make sure is that at the end of the day, whether it's 20 years from now, 30 years from now, whenever my time is expired here, I want my kids to be like, man, he helped a lot of people. He did a good job for people. And to me, that's kind of the legacy that I want to leave for my kids, is that, hey, your dad was all right. He was a good guy. He helped a lot of people, and he was a good father. And that's that kind of made my decision a lot easier to exit, because I needed to prioritize different things. And I think my passion and excitement for helping other people, hopefully wears off on my kids, and they'll see that and be like, hey man, it's a good thing to give. It's a good thing to be a decent human being. And again, I say all this, but there's times where nobody's perfect, right? Like, you'll be in line at the grocery store and somebody's writing an actual check for their groceries, and you're like, what are you doing? And so it's not all sunshine and lollipops. You can't be a great person 100% of the time. I truly believe that. There's the nicest people in the world, but they have their moments too, right? But if I can be someone that my kids admire at the end of the day and respect, then that's a good life.
Well, I think, and however you phrase it, no one's going to, the only people that bat 1,000 probably got lucky the one time they batted and they never got up to the plate again. You know,
Right. If you
we're
don't
not,
swing the bat, you're not going to hit the ball, right? I mean, and people that don't take chances aren't, everybody's got a different philosophy and lifestyle and whatever else. But if you don't take some chances, and if you don't, I like to say, try to do something uncomfortable once a day, right? Just whether it's I don't know, just doing something that you normally wouldn't do. And if you can step out of your comfort zone, then I think it's a good day. And I think me moving from something that I was doing for 25 years into something that, isn't something that I'm used to, as far as podcasting and corporate speaking and sober coaching or whatever else. But that's what I think makes people better, is that they dive into the unknown and then they explore and then they figure it out. And some people are of the opinion, well, geez, you should have had a backup plan, or why would you leave such a good job to do something that you don't know is going to work out? Well, I mean, sometimes you have to take the leap of faith and you have to bet on yourself. And, that's kind of what my philosophy was.
Well, I think, and I understand, you don't, I understand the philosophy, especially when we're working with young people, that, before you quit a job, have a job, right? And usually, usually when we say that is because we don't want them living in our basement because they don't have any skin in the game, right? And so, but when you talk about betting on yourself, usually that means that you're paying for the basement that you're sleeping in, and in one fashion or another. So at some point you're going to have to figure something out, because there's probably not going to be a bailout plan. And
Right. And I saw something the other day and kind of hit home. It said, nobody's going to rescue you. You're making your decisions. You're a grown adult. Nobody's going to rescue you. You have to figure it out, right? I mean, and at the end of the day, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to figure out a way to make more impact with people and provide, something that gives me joy and passion, right? And I think that's important as well. A lot of people, unfortunately, they get up, they go to work 9 o'clock, get home at 5, they have dinner, they watch some TV, they go to bed. That's not what I envisioned my life ever being. And again, everybody's got their own thing, but that, to me, you're just kind of existing. You're not really living.
I think there is I've talked about it many times on the journey about, you can frame it as the hero's journey. We can, by Joseph Campbell or Viktor Frankl's work about, pursuing purpose and meaning in life. Or a previous guest we had on, Amy Schoenthal, who wrote a book called The Setback Cycle. And it's the idea that it's within the setback that may very well be the beginning of the next chapter, if we're being open to learning about it. And there's something about that when there isn't a backup plan, when you're betting on yourself, that tenacity will come up, that the creativity will come there, as long as we can keep that fear at bay. Use
Right.
enough fear to make it real, but
Fear is motivating, right? Fear is motivating. And I forget, who was it? Cortez, maybe, when they came over, he said, "Okay, burn the boats," and all his guys were like, "Burn the boats." He's like, "Yep, this failure is not an option. We're here to discover gold," or whatever it was. I might be wrong in my analysis there, but burn the boats, right? You have no other option but to succeed. And does that put a lot of pressure on people? Yeah, probably. But like you said, when you're in that position, you become more creative and you think outside the box and you look at other opportunities that you might not have looked at before. And to me, that's exciting. And I always said that I never want to be told how much I'm worth, meaning I don't want a job where somebody says, "Okay, we're going to pay you $150,000 a year." Okay, that sounds great, but I want a job where I make my own hours. If I want to work 80 hours a week, great. If I want to work an hour a week, that's on me. And I just think that when you take that leap of faith, you give yourself also a lot of freedom, but that freedom can also be the rope that hangs you at the end of the day as well. So there's a lot of balancing going on when you're out there trying new things or building a new business or whatever else. So it's a little scary, that's for sure.
Well, and yeah, I agree with you 100%. Having coming up on a year now, that I left a company that I started, and then sold it 10 years ago, and then left it altogether a year ago. I think that the phrase that was that I've shared and was shared with me is that it's exciting and scary at the same time. And
Right.
there's an excitement and a freedom that comes with the ability to, okay, I'm going to create my own schedule. What ways can I, for me, from a spiritual standpoint, can this be a spiritual experience? But at the end of the day, similar to yourself, how can I help people? How can I plant some seeds to make a difference in someone else's life? Recognizing that I may not see the harvest of it, but how can I put myself in a position to be able to plant those seeds? And that's what it sounds like that, first it was education as an educator, and then later it was in the finance world. And now it's that theme has always been the same. It sounds like that you've wanted to make an impact and wanted to help people.
Right. And at the end of the day, you're not necessarily always thinking about that while you're in it, right? But at the end of the day, if we leave this place a better place, then that's kind of the mission, right? I mean, I think too many people are trying to keep up with their neighbors and trying to post a million pictures on social media about how great their life is and whatever else. But what are people doing to give back to society, right? I mean, you know, I'll be the first to tell you that my ego got in the way a lot when I was drinking. I mean, my ego kept me from getting sober because I thought I could handle it on my own. I don't need any help. I'm not going to AA because that's a bunch of, I mean, it's like witchcraft and, all the things you hear about AA, which is completely not true. But my ego didn't allow me to get help for years and years and years. And then finally, I surrendered to that and got the help that I needed. And I just, circling back, I just think for me, and it's part of the mission of people in AA and recovery is to help the next person, because there's somebody that was in the same position when they first walked into the doors of AA or NA or whatever it might be. You were there at some point, scared as hell, not wanting to be there, thinking this is ridiculous, I don't need help or whatever. There's somebody that's in the same boat, and our job as people in recovery and trying to help people is to make sure that they know that there's somebody there to help them. And to me, that's it's empowering and helpful and whatever else. And at the end of the day, that makes me feel good. It makes me sleep at night. And if I can do that going forward, then that's what I'm going to try to do.
Well, and the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps, poured wisdom into each one of those steps. And that 12th step, really speaks to what you just said, is that if you are doing and living the first 11, now there's a responsibility to be able to model that as well as share that for others. And
Right.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's crazy to me that they wrote that, I think close to 100 years ago now, and it still applies today. It doesn't go out of style. There's boom, 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 and you look at it, you're like, man, if I can follow these steps, then things are going to be better. And it just blows my mind when if I'm reading out of the big book, which is the AA book. Um, just like the stories, they don't change from the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. I mean, it doesn't change. You can relate to those, and I'll read it every once in a while and be like, man, that could have happened in 2025, and clearly this was written years and years ago. And to me, that's super powerful that they had the wisdom to be able to do that.
Absolutely. So, Matt, I thank you very much for being on the show, and I know that there is, a lot of seeds for a lot of listeners that you have scattered and placed to our listeners today. What would be if someone wanted to reach out to you, either we're interested in either just talking to you or meeting you, listening to your episodes on the podcast, or even maybe having you come and speak somewhere? What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, the podcast Single Dad, Sober Dad is available anywhere you get your podcast. So you can go on Spotify or Apple or Google it or whatever else, and you can find it anywhere. As far as the corporate speaking and the sober coaching stuff, you can reach out directly to me. I still have a Yahoo account. I get grief from people all the time. It's MW2323 at yahoo.com. And again, I get plenty of grief of still having a Yahoo account, but it's email. To me, it doesn't matter. Or you can, reach me on social media and whatnot. I don't know if I should be giving out my phone number on this thing or not. I mean,
No.
probably not.
Email probably is probably the
Yeah,
easiest
yeah,
way.
I don't need a bunch of crank calls at 2 in the morning.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Well, and it's funny at this point now, you have to keep the Yahoo account, just because now it's a classic. So,
right, right.
so now that's the point.
I read something, and I'll, finish up on this. I read something that people with Yahoo accounts who are applying for jobs are like almost immediately dismissed because the people that are hiring they look at that like, man, these people have no clue what's going on in the world because they must not have any technology in their life. And that's me in a nutshell. My old nickname was Control Alt Delete because I have no clue about technology, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, but yeah, I will keep that Yahoo account until the end.
Well, Matt, thank you again for spending some time with us and sharing your story, as well as sharing your some of the things that you've come to discover about yourself, about the different times that you've recreated yourself as you've made some circles around life. So again, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. It was a good time.
And if anyone has any of those seeds been placed within anybody, listening to Matt's story, definitely look at that, share with other people, either if you're looking at, time to get sober, to get into recovery, or maybe it's time that you're restless and time to move on to the next chapter of your life. There's definitely some, you can reach out to myself or reach out to Matt, but definitely just don't keep that to yourself. As always, thank you for being here, and I look forward to being with you next week.